For tuning in, guys. I want to do the required coronavirus video, which is definitely necessary during this trying time. I haven't really made any videos yet about the coronavirus and kind of needed to provide my take. But really, I wanted to provide some valuable information for people, both businesses and individuals alike, expectations and just how to make the best of the stimulus package. But first, I just want to mention how my channel and my Twitter handle have both changed to my old family name. That was actually changed as well to be more Americanized. I've just been receiving a lot of hate mail, given that my Twitter is growing. I'm almost at 10,000 followers, and same with my channel. Just want to make sure I protect myself. I really like my job and don't really want to lose it. But anyway, let's get down to business. First, just want to talk about China. Really this whole thing is China's fault when you break it down. They suppressed information. They provided false information to the World Health Organization. They disappeared doctors and whistleblower journalists about, how contagious the virus was. They detained journalists from Hong Kong. I remember reading from the New York Times. This was back in January. They had footage and, pictures that they made them delete off their phone. So it's just stunning how people like Hillary Clinton and other major news sources, they just keep pushing this narrative that, we're the number one leader of the deaths from the coronavirus. This is the epicenter now. I just can't believe that they actually believe the Chinese propaganda as opposed to our I guess, propaganda, or at least news sources or numbers. Really, when you look at SARS, for example, though, 17 years ago, China was different. They were not as globalized. They didn't have the same kind of economic or transportation capabilities like they do now. So much has really changed. So that's why this is more serious than SARS. I mean, the virus itself is 2.5 times more contagious than the flu. I'll admit that at first I was on that little camp of saying, okay, well, this is like the flu. But then I started to realize, how fast it spread in Italy, or at least, my friend that's in China that lives there right now, he told me how bad it was getting, and to prepare and to really, start grabbing a lot of the necessary food and, toilet paper, things like that. So I try to prepare as soon as I started to realize how bad it could get. But anyhow, China has been misreporting their numbers. I'm definitely looking at the 21 million cell phone users that have decreased. I'm looking at the amount of urns that they've purchased. That's around a couple million that they've had, that I know has increased the numbers on average from last year to this year. It was definitely a difference of more than a few thousand. So if you add up these two things, there's definitely a lot more deaths that they're not really talking about. I potentially think it could be in the millions. And I was even saying that back around December. I was saying that I didn't believe China and how bad this really was. I was saying it back then, and I'm going to say it again now. But, I'm more in the camp, too, of not thinking. I think that this was an accident. I think it's more so about the low standards of health and the cleanliness as a country that China has. I mean, people spit on pavement pretty regularly. They're really close. They don't care about space as much as the West does. They litter a lot, etc. They just don't have the same kind of standards of living when it comes to the West. Not to sound like a chauvinist, but truly they have these disgusting wet markets that they have live animals. They just reopen them without any real difference. But even again, like back in January, how they told WHO that there was no evidence to human transmission when there clearly was and is. So I'm feeling right now that China, they just really realized that this is really bad. They needed to cover it up. They didn't want the world to know how bad it was. And in doing so, they allowed it to happen so they could be on track economically with the rest of the world. It's almost like mutually assured destruction when it comes to the Cold War. Almost the same thing. So really, they may or may not have created this virus artificially in some Wuhan lab, but they also maybe have abetted in its spread by not giving the right information to the rest of the world. So really, they're culpable for that, and I think some countries should seek damages. Why are people traveling in and out of China and going to Europe? Things like that. That needs to be explored. But let's talk about some fake news too. I mean, let's just go through the quick list. The media has been wrong so many times, and infuriating. I wanted to call for, a moratorium of just this partisan politics. I lasted like 4 days because they just kept attacking the right. I couldn't take it anymore. But what they've been saying is, he dissolved the pandemic response team. He didn't. He cut the CDC budget. He didn't. WHO did not offer U.S. testing kits, or they said that they offered us testing kits and Trump turned them down, which he didn't. They never offered us the testing kits. He also did not refer the virus as a hoax, but rather how the left was saying they downplayed it. Think about it. He stopped travel from China for at least Chinese aliens coming here. U.S. citizens and spouses could still travel. But anyway, he even did some other things too. Like he signed into law the National Biodefense Strategy. It developed surge capabilities across healthcare providers in conjunction with foreign governments. So they were planning this. This was back in 2018. So in addition, why isn't anyone asking or talking about how the Obama admin did not order the N95 masks to replace the 100 million that were used during the swine flu epidemic? No one's talking about this. Experts advised him to replace it, but him and Biden, they failed on purchasing new ones. So Trump has been scrambling to, replenish these kinds of things. He's also been, using the Defense Production Act, which people think he hasn't been. He actually has been. He's been spending billions of dollars on equipment, medical supplies, ventilators, and a lot of these companies that are private, they're willingly shifting their production means to actual medical supplies. So in a lot of arenas, he hasn't been needed to actually shift their production to something else. So, in addition to just all this stuff that I'm talking about, I just actually want to provide some good information for people. I work in banking, so I just want to talk about, SBA loans and the actual treasury checks. Who's actually eligible for these SBA loans. So small businesses, 501c3s, both with fewer than 500 employees, sole proprietors, independent contractors. So if you're working on 1099, you're eligible. You can utilize these loans for utilities, rent, your mortgage, payroll, sick leave, healthcare premiums, all the things that you have to spend for your employees or yourself if you're a sole proprietor or 1099. These loans, they go off the total amount of what I just listed: utilities, rent, mortgage, payroll, sick leave. That is your principal. So anything over that amount has an interest rate, which is still pretty decent interest rate last I checked it. So you can receive up to 250% of your principal. So if that makes sense, you apply to your local bank. They're going to send you some kind of link, right? And then from that link, they're going to send you the actual application, which what I've heard is Chase and some other banks are going to have them available tomorrow. So if you at least fill this form out on your local bank's website, you can at least get access early. So make sure you do that if you have an opportunity. Definitely worthwhile because it's going to free up cash flow for you in other ways. So I definitely would recommend looking into an SBA loan, even if you don't think you need it. Also, so if you have treasury checks coming, so I like to call them the Trump checks, the government's going to disperse these checks either as a direct deposit or through the mail. So if you received a direct deposit through the IRS before, you're going to get it as a direct deposit as well. But if your bank account has changed, this could be a little problematic. So you can either wait and just let it fix itself. That I wouldn't recommend going that route. But the banking institution will reject the direct deposit because the account doesn't exist anymore, and it'll send that information back to the IRS. Then they'll figure that out from there. But you can directly go to irs.gov and you can adjust it. Or you can call the Treasury Department. I would recommend either of those two routes. So if you haven't filed a tax return in the past 2 years and you're receiving Social Security, you'll also be eligible to receive it. So don't worry about that. So people were worried, okay, do I have to actually fill out a tax return right now because I want to receive this check? Maybe you're worried about paying a CPA and that will negate the cost because you'll receive the check, yada, yada. Well, now you don't have to worry about that. You're going to receive the check anyway. They already have your information. They'll just direct deposit into your account. Also, if you have an IRA and you need RMDs, so your required minimum distributions, you don't need to worry about taking those if you don't want. So basically, Uncle Sam wants his taxes, right? So you can just defer them now according to the stimulus package. So other than that, they've been really haranguing us saying, oh, conservatives are okay with socialism now because they're receiving checks. Well, I'm okay with Social Security, and that's a permanent socialist ideal or idea, but this isn't permanent. I'm okay with the government taking hold and kind of steering us through this storm. We already give them tax revenue of our dollars, and if they can give us some emergency funds for people that need it, I'm okay with that. That's what governments are supposed to do. They're supposed to protect and serve. And the Greek actual word for government does mean steering the ship. So that's exactly what they're supposed to do. We had to inject the economy with a boatload of money, and that's what we've done. $2.2 trillion that's going to be injected in the economy. I like it. I'm a traditional conservative, so I believe that we need to have a strong federal government. I think that Trump should issue some martial law edicts or at least announcements for certain counties. If you're a big metropolitan area, I think that that's going to, be more dangerous than certain areas. That's why I can understand where some conservatives are not, for, let's see, like DeSantis yesterday just announced, stay-at-home order. Some people will say, oh, well, that shouldn't apply to the whole state because some counties are different. I get that. But, broadly speaking, you need to tell people to stay at home. A lot of people are stupid. They're going to continue spreading this virus. And we need to kind of nip this in the butt before it gets worse. And it's going to last longer if we don't do something now rather than later, at least just like lukewarm act on this. We need to be hot and quick and strike while the iron's hot. And that's why I was really hoping to see, these stay-at-home orders sooner rather than later. But other than that, if people are wondering right now, oh, well, I have to pay my rent or my mortgage. I don't think that you should be concerned because you're about to receive unemployment benefits up to 100% of your average pay. You're also going to get these Trump checks. So you could potentially be receiving like $5,000 to $8,000 in the next few months. And that's not even mentioning if you got severance pay from your company. You could literally be rolling in it right now. And if you got dropped off of your healthcare, apply for COBRA, apply for Obamacare. I don't like Obamacare, but it's an option. That's why I want people to know they have options, and just don't listen to this leftist nonsense that says we need Medicare for all. This shows that, the system's broken. Clearly people have options. They just don't know where to implement or where to look. All right, guys, thanks again for tuning in, and I hope I provided some good information. I'll catch you on the next one.